Welcome to this online session on Syria. Especially at the moment, the entire focus is on Middle East with Gaza, Israel, the what is going on in Lebanon, what's going on in Iran, all over. So, with the result, I think this new addition of Syria, which has suddenly fallen off, is very important. I had served in Iraq for 2 years, and those days, Iraq and Syria both had Baath parties and they had almost joined together. There were all kinds of issues of both joining, as well as Egypt was wanting to join, so it became a united Arab Republic. But there were too many factions. As you know, there's not just it's not considered to be a Muslim country, but there are a whole heap of other people. There are Christians, there are Alawites, especially Assad family was from a Shia, which is called the Alawites. Anyway, I'm not getting into that factions, but what happened was after ruling for so long, that is his father who was in the Air Force, took over and thereafter he continued. And then the present one, who's a dentist actually speaking, who's now run away to Russia, he also, you see, most of these authoritarian countries, they need to have very strict discipline and they just don't tolerate any kind of dissidence. And they literally go ahead with, killing people or whatever it is. So that excess became too much. And then people started revolting. And finally, you find this HTS, which is actually a banned kind of outfit. They were backed basically by Turkey and some other people, and they have taken over power. I just thought I'll bring 2 points before I hand over to very eminent speakers that we have got today. One is that surprisingly, in this world where it's not just the neighborhood that matters, but something that happens far off also matters. So I read that this HTS troops, when they liberated Damascus, they had a whole heap of Uyghur warriors, about 5,000 of them. Now that has got China worried, actually speaking, because the Uyghurs so far have not really shown kind of a militancy, but now they're worried that whether Turkey will help them and try and get to that part of the China. And the second thing which I read only yesterday, which is very important, is about this new Ahmed al-Shara who has emerged as a leader. He is talking now very moderate, entire polity that he's talking in terms of. He wants to have friendly relations with Israel. He wants to follow something like what Saudi Arabia model is. He wants to make sure that the Islam becomes attractive and not coercive. So there are different kinds of signals which are coming out. I think we will initially be able to throw some light on what is going on, and thereafter come to as the thing unfold. But at the moment, Israel is of course taking advantage of it. They are extending their areas in Golan Heights, and they have destroyed a lot of military equipment of Syria. Iran has been now on the back foot because Alawites, who were actually a Shia faction, they were supportive to Iran. So Iran and Saudi, that famous, the duel which continues in Middle East, is at the moment a disadvantage to Iran. So with these few words, let me first hand over to General Mahajan, who will introduce the speakers. We're going to have General Gadkari, who of course is a very erudite speaker, scholar. He's from Gunners, and we have Hemant Mahajan, Marathas, Brigadier Mahajan, who of course writes very often and has got a YouTube channel. And then we have Group Captain Purohit, who will be also speaking. So, Shishir, may I request you to please introduce the biodatas of each of the speakers when they come in?
Right, sir. Good morning. General Gadkari will take on now and he will handle the entire webinar. So I hand over to General Gadkari. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Air Marshal Gokhale has introduced the subject very eloquently. In fact, there is no better person than him, having served as the defense attaché in Iraq and being there for a long time. Syria is in news suddenly. And till now, it was Israel, Hezbollah, Hamas, and overnight everyone is talking about Syria. So that is what is most surprising part of this story, that where was Syria all this while? Actually, Syria was always there in the background. It's just that people never thought that things will change so drastically overnight a 50-year-old ruling party and dictatorship will collapse with a matter of, for most people, a matter of day. Actually, it took 12 days. So to discuss that, we have three speakers. I have already been introduced, and I will give a brief background to Syria before Group Captain Purohit, who takes on the implications on the Western Front. And let me introduce Group Captain Purohit to you all. Group Captain Purohit is a graduate of the National Defense Academy. He's from the flying branch and has over 5,500 hours of flying experience in the IAF. He's been with the Mauritius Defense Forces, training the pilots of the Mauritius Police. He's got extensive experience in flying in Siachen. He has been the crew of the largest airbase in India and Asia, and I think that should be Chandigarh. And he's flown extensively all over the country. Academically, he's a graduate of the Defense Services Staff College. He's MSc in Defense and Strategic Studies and MPhil in Defense Management. Post-retirement, he's joined the academia and he writes extensively for a number of magazines: Financial Express, Indian Express, Cash Journal, Policy Journal, and such very high quality journals. Today he will take on the implications on the region, which is the main topic, in the north and west of Syria, which would include Turkey, Lebanon, Israel, and the US. We have with us also Brigadier Mahajan. Probably Brigadier Mahajan is well known to all of you. He doesn't require an introduction yet. As order goes, I will try and introduce to you. He was commissioned on the 15th of June 1975 in the 7th Maratha Light Infantry. Throughout the service, Brigadier Mahajan was actively involved in counterinsurgency in J&K, Punjab, and he has served on the Indo-China border, Indo-Pakistan border in the northeast. He had commanded his battalion 7 MLI in Op Rakshak in challenging terrains in Poonch and Rajouri. At the peak of militancy, under his command, his unit received a unit citation, 18 Gallantry Award winners, and his own Yuddha Seva medal at that during that time. Thereafter, he's distinguished himself and he's been a faculty at the Army War College in the High Command Wing. After his retirement, he's taken up the academic role in a big way. Currently, he is the chair professor for the Veer Savarkar Chair of National Security at the Pune University. He is the head of the Strategic Studies Center at Rashtriya Swatantra Veer Savarkar Smarak in Mumbai. He writes extensively. He's authored about 5,000 articles and 17 books. He will take on today implications of the region on the east and south of Syria, which will include basically Iraq, Iran, India, and the Russian influence. Finally, we'll have the question answer session, which will be open to everybody. You can put your questions in the chat box if required, or even ask them as the time comes. And finally, you'll be vote of thanks by Brigadier Mahajans. Without wasting any time, let me get down to a brief about how did the situation in Syria come about here. Now, like I said, Syria it was at the back of everybody's mind, but wasn't there in the front. Maybe it was not glamorous to talk about Syria as much it is to talk about Israel, about Hamas, Palestinians, or about Hezbollah, Iran. But if you see the landmass of Syria, it has major geopolitical implications. And I have this Google imagery in front of you. I have a map later, but to tell you that Syria actually is at the hub of connecting land masses which go left towards Europe and right towards Central Asia and South Asia. And that is why the fall of Assad is so strategically important. And let me tell you that most experts, even as of today, after 7 days, are really wondering as to what would be the repercussions to the fall because of the fall of Assad. Now, as I've already told you, if you look at this map, there are countries which are to the north and to the south. Turkey is the northern neighbor. It has adversarial relations with Syria. It had Iraq to the right. Iraq went through a patch of good friendly relations, bad relations, again good relations Jordan has been neutral most of the time, is more or less advocating the Western thought. Lebanon, and there is a huge history of Syria and Lebanon, followed by Israel in the south and the Golan Heights. Now, the problems in Syria has been no different than the problems that have existed in the Middle East. And what is differentiating is that in Syria, there was one regime which ruled for 50 years. So if I go through the timelines, there are many timelines, but I have drawn out a few of them, about 6 of them. I wanted to get to this slide to emphasize on the point. This is a WhatsApp, what you call, message, which most of you would have got, and in some form or other. Says if you're confused who is fighting whom in Syria, this slide will clarify it. So you can well imagine the mess that Syria was or Syria is in. There are too many factions, too many people, too many parties, too many countries that are involved. I will not try to solve this riddle that is there, but trying to decluster it a little bit for you. Now, like I said, one of the major reasons for Syrian problem has been the sectarian composition, the religious composition. Syria is 74% Sunni, which was ruled by 11% Alawite Muslim. Marshal Gokhale did refer to Alawites. Alawites are basically Shias. They are in minority, yet for 50 years, both Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad ruled for 50 years. Both of them are allies. Now, thereafter, there is in minority, but there are almost over a dozen religious sects that exist in Syria. Similarly, amongst the Muslims also, they are Sunni and Muslim. I already told you that. Now, coming to the milestones in Syrian history, the first milestone I've taken is independence of Syria from France in 1946. A lot happened before that. Something similar to what happened in Palestine. French were in occupation along with the British, which were in Palestine and South. They didn't want to leave, but ultimately had to give independence in 1946. The next most important timeline is 1970, when General Hafiz al-Assad, who was the father of Bashar al-Assad, who took charge. This happened after 4 coups had taken place in Syria, all of them by colonels. Ultimately, in 1970, General Hafiz, who is an Alawite, who is a Shia basically, at that point in time, the Syrian army had majority of Alawites and Druze, and that is why the influence of General Hafiz was quite a lot. He took over power, and what happened was stability came to Syria, which had not happened in the previous 25 years. And that is the reason he survived for whatever time he survived. The next timeline is 1990. Now, between 1970 and 1990, a lot happened. And before that, in 1963, Syria had lost the Golan Heights to Israel. That is an important milestone because till today, Syria is fighting with Israel for Golan Heights, and it has not been able to take it. In fact, now it is lost probably forever. Before 1990, Hafiz al-Said, he tried everything possible. He had friendship with Iraq, he had friendship with Lebanon, then he got into Lebanon full time. He got into the civil war in Lebanon. All this led to the downturn of economy in Syria. One was because the military spending went up, and secondly, there was a huge drought, the worst drought in Syria, due to which Syrian economy looked down and descent started. That is the point from which descent started. When he died in 2000, that is the next timeline, there was supposedly would have been a power vacuum. The reason was, it was not Bashar al-Assad who was supposed to take over, it was his elder brother, but who had died in a car accident somewhere in, I think, 1994 or 96. And Bashar, who was then, like Marshal Gokhale mentioned, was studying for his dentistry in London, had to be recalled, and overnight he was put into a military training. Imagine, within 6 weeks of coming from London, he was in a military academy. He was commissioned in 1 year as a captain in the Syrian army. And in 2000, he took over from his father as the leader of president of Syria. That from 2000 to 2010, in fact, there was a period when there was optimism in the West, optimism in Syria, that he will bring change. Unfortunately, he did not. He went worst. In 2000, broke in Tunisia. Small in Syria, but grew into a major civil war. By 2012, it was a full-fledged war. And in fact, it was this war which has led to the downturn of Bashar, because he grew dictatorial, he grew menacingly cruel. I mean, there are no words to describe. And the next timeline actually is 2024, is not coming here, 2024, which is what happened almost 15 days back. Now, why did it happen? I'm sure we'll get covered, but one of the major reasons was Syria had the world divided into two parts, pro-Assad and anti-Assad. In the anti-Assad camp were the US, the NATO, EU, Israel, and Turkey. In the pro-Assad camp was Russia, Iran, and to an extent, China. Now, because of the Ukraine war and because of the Israel-Hamas war, Iran and Hezbollah, in fact, Hezbollah was another supporter of Syria, they were weakened to an extent that when the treaty with Hezbollah was signed by Israel, it gave a signal to HTS through Turkey, it's time for you to move ahead. Turkey gave that signal, and that is how HTS started from north of Aleppo, captured Aleppo the next day, and within a matter of 12 days had captured Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. As we know, Bashar al-Assad thereafter ran to Russia, fled to Russia. What is his status today? He's given something on Instagram, a note which people are deciphering whether it's from him or somebody else. I'm sure it will come out in days' time. But this was how the things had fanned out. I'm sure as we go in the next two parts, the intricacies of all that I've explained will come to. And now I hand over to Group Captain Purohit for implications of what has happened to the west of Syria. Yeah, Group Captain Purohit.
Yes, sir. So may I share my presentation?
You have to take out your presentation, Nitin, now. You stop sharing, Nitin, then only can Purohit do his sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, Praveen, you can share your presentation now.
No, Paile Nitin will have to take out his...
He's already done that. There's a problem. Yeah, Praveen, you can share the screen now.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. It's just coming up.
Yeah, okay.
There is a little bit of a hitch. Just let me.
No problem. Take your time.
Can you see this?
You press the arrow of sharing the screen. That will help. Yeah, okay, yeah, fine. We can see it now. Yeah. Yeah, we can see a screen now, Praveen. Only that Pravir, unmute your mic. The mic is mute. Pravir, you unmute your mic.
Now it's is the am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible now. Yeah, you're audible.
And the slide is also visible.
No, slide is not visible. Only I can see a P. It's a blank screen with only P. That's all. There's a blank screen. The slide cannot be seen.
1 second, sir. There is some which yesterday it went off well. I think I'll presenting and represent.
Doesn't matter. You can do without it in case it cannot happen.
No, just 30 seconds, sir. I think
Okay,
it
no
will come
problem.
on. I hope
We're
now
just
it's
waiting
visible.
for, yeah, no. You haven't shared your screen. You share your screen.
I have shared, sir.
No, it is not coming on this.
I don't know what is this.
Doesn't matter. You can leave it. I mean, in case it doesn't come through, you can do without it.
I just to explain the maps.
Somebody else shared, somebody else moved the slides.
Maybe Brigadier Mahajan can start his part and he can come back later.
Okay, Prabir, you can come back later. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay,
Hemant, sir,
fine.
Hemant sir, you can take on.
Acha, okay, but okay, I'll do it.
So you are in the slide sorter mode.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Can you see my slide now? I'm not
No.
able to go on a full mode, unfortunately.
So
Full
go to
mode.
the edit mode at least. Edit pe chale jao na. Edit.
Okay. That I'll do that. Yes, that I agree with you. Okay. Can you see me on the edit mode now?
Yeah, I
Slightly-
can see on the edit.
Slightly
Yeah,
bigger?
Yeah,
Okay.
edit mode ठीक है. चलो आप.
Okay, I start. Thank you, Cass, for giving me an opportunity to present my views on what's happening in Syria today. The topic I have been given is the fall of Assad regime and its impact on Iraq, Iran, Russia, etc. And I'm including China also, plus India also. Plus, I'll cover a bit on what effect it has, what lessons can India draw from what is happening in Syria, because events happening there are all right. That is just a collection of information. But what is more important is there something that you can learn from there? Okay. Before me, General Gadkari has already spoken about Syria. All that I want to tell you is that economy of Syria is in deep trouble. One main reason is the oil and the gas, the region which is there, which used to make Syria a prosperous country, now is under the control of Kurdish militia. So therefore, there's an acute shortage of everything as far as Syria is concerned. And 69% of the population is under poverty. There's too much of a violence which is going on everywhere. And the present president, Mr. Bashir, he said as late as today that he wants to have a Sharia-compliant Islamic state in Syria. So if that be the thinking, what kind of a state will we have there is a mute question. And as far as the population is concerned, General Gadkari had highlighted as to who all are there, Arabs and Kurds and others, etc., Islam and Sunnis and Shias. But what I want to tell you is that the population is too diverse. They're being supported by various people, various parties. So therefore, getting them together and becoming a one nation is going to be a huge challenge. All that I want to tell you is about 4 weeks back, if he had said that Cash would have a talk or a discussion on Syrian crisis, nobody would have said, people would have asked, why are you having a talk when nothing is happening there? And in 4 weeks flat, a government has changed there, a family which was ruling the country for over 50 years, cities have fallen. And what is common here is that this has been a repeat of what happened in Afghanistan. Syria had a very well-trained army with lots of weapons, etc. But let us be very clear: just because you have weapons, you have weapons to show, you have an army, you have a navy, you have an air force. That doesn't mean you have a capability to defend your country. And when the HTS started advancing, the Syrian army fell without a fight, and this is exactly what had happened in Afghanistan. In CAS only, if you remember, some time back we had a talk in which one of the officers who had trained Afghan army was very confident at that point of time in saying that Afghan army will put up a good fight and Taliban is not going to have just going to take over Afghanistan. He was proved wrong, and similarly, so-called well-trained army has now just given up without fighting, without any kind of a fighting, showing any fighting spirit. So therefore, now today the HTS is ruling, and he's appointed one of the governors as the person who will take care of the country till the time some kind of a all-party government is formed. So there's a complete flux as far as Syria is concerned. For Iran, it has been a strategic defeat. The Shiite crescent, which was extending all over, has been disrupted. Russia has a problem because its influence has gone down. Turkey has emerged as a dominant player. Israel is taking all kinds of risk and extending its operations. It has gone ahead of Golan Heights. Its tanks are almost on the outskirts of the capital of Syria, and they have destroyed the navy and the air force of Syria, as well as various factories which produce arms and ammunition in Syria. USA is still struggling. As late as today, there's a very interesting statement by Trump. Trump said an unfriendly regime has taken over in Syria, which has been backed by Turkey. Now, Mr. Joe Biden is trying to send his foreign secretary all over to work out some kind of a strategic cooperation, while Trump is making statement that this is not our place where we are going to fight, and an unfriendly regime is taken over, etc. So what is going to be the US role? We'll have to see when the time comes. As far as China is concerned, about 1 year back, China had backed Syria, the autocratic regime of Syria, and it was very confident that by backing autocratic regimes, it can gain economically. But well, China has been proved wrong. And as far as India is concerned, very broadly, we want peace. So let's now talk about in more details the same thing what I told you in the first slide. Now, as far as Iran is concerned, it's a strategic setback. Iran is now, its strength has gone down. Its desire to dominate the world in middle is gone down. Its military potential has been reduced. So there are limits to what Iran can do. And with the ongoing war with Israel, it is now definitely receding in all the spheres, And as far as HTS is concerned, it is targeted the Iranian establishment in Damascus. So it's very, very clear that HTS is against Iran. Now, and as far as Hezbollah is concerned, that is something very interesting. Hezbollah was supposed to be a militia which was supposed to help the government. But Hezbollah, call it a militia, call it a terrorist group, it is not following any well-known terrorist tactic, but it wants to only fire missiles and let's say drones, etc. It is not interested in fighting per se. So therefore, Iran has been defeated here quite badly, and it's a big setback as far as Iran is concerned. As far as Russia is concerned, its influence has gone down. It was overburdened by the Ukraine war, sanctions of the West, and it was not able to therefore sustain the fragile regime of Assad. And losing Syria has been a great setback. So what it tells you here is, however great a power is, capacity to wage war over 2 years, 3 years is not going to be easy. Russia is today fighting war with Ukraine for 2 years, plus it's supporting many countries here and there. So they have what is called, they have just run short of ammunition, short of, weaponaries to fight, etc. So therefore, its ability to help its friends and the friendly regime has been reduced drastically. So therefore, you require a lot of logistic stamina if you want to fight for 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years. And this kind of a logistic stamina, even America doesn't seem to have. Now, as far as Turkey is concerned, it has expanded its role. And suddenly, now, yesterday, or rather, day before yesterday, the US Foreign Secretary was there in Turkey trying to tell Turkey, let's cooperate now. But what is emerged purely from what comes out in the media report is Turkey wants to have an own independent role in this whole thing, and it wants to be a leading state as far as the Middle East is concerned. Meaning, it is not ready to listen to even USA. And Turkey has a huge problem of about 3 million refugees who are there. So Turkey would like to send them back so that the economic.
Sir, Hemant sir will leave Turkey to.
Okay, I'll leave it. Yeah.
He will cover Turkey and Israel both.
Okay, I'll leave Israel also because actually what is happening is this somehow it gets overlapped. Now, as far as USA is concerned, it has got 900 troops. But what is important here is that USA is using the present time to basically carry out air attacks on the ISIS assets which are there, and it wants a regional stability. But Donald Trump is saying something, Joe Biden is saying something. So therefore, till the time Donald Trump completely takes over USA and starts showing his hands as far as the Syrian policy is concerned, we're not going to know as to what exactly USA is going to do there. But basically, USA would like to support the existing regime so that some kind of a peace returns. But the biggest concern of USA and the whole world is today rise of Islamic forces, which is there in this regime. Now, so therefore, there are a lot of challenges which are there with deep divisions among the opposition groups, threat of ISIS coming up again. So therefore, what the present Prime Minister will do, his diplomatic skills will be tested, his ability to get them together will be tested. He will have to ensure that extremist resurgence does not take place. He'll have to build a unified government. It will have to have a global and regional cooperation. So there are many things. Will he prove equal to the task? One is not sure. As far as the Chinese angle is concerned, one would remember that about in March 2023, China had brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and it was supposed to be a very important moment. People were commenting that China has a foothold in this regime. But last year, when Chinese President Xi Jinping talked about a strategic partnership with Bashar al-Assad, he thought that the regime was worth betting upon. But 14 months later, Assad has run away, and the Chinese gamble which they took has proved wrong. So therefore, China's broad geopolitical strategy of sustaining a network of autocratic regimes such as Syria, Iran, Venezuela, etc., is proving to be wrong. Similarly, its ability to have good relations between Saudi and Iran doesn't seem to be working out. Okay. As far as Iran is concerned, we have talked about Iran, a strategic defeat. But what will happen in near future? Will they be able to come back, etc.? One is not able to say at this point of time. But there are limits to what it can do. Now, will China act as a potential mediator? Because China today doesn't have any direct military environment like USA or Russia or others, And today the world is involved in many wars: the Ukraine war, the Arab, the Israel, Hamas, Houthi, Hezbollah, and Iran war. So therefore, this may be an opportunity for China to fish into the troubled waters of South China Sea. And there are some experts who feel that China may use this opportunity to carry out something big in Taiwan, and they will try and expand their influence in the South China Sea, etc. They'll be more offensive against the Philippines, plus this will also give China time. Today, the Chinese economy is going down and down, and for last almost about 2 years, they are going into what is called as a deflation. So maybe they have some time now to adjust and sort of catch up and improve their economy, improve their strategic posturing, and maybe focus more on Iran, because the whole world, including USA, is busy today in fighting one crisis after another. As far as India is concerned, our initial priority was protecting those 90 Indians who are there. Some workers are there. We have issued a travel advisory saying that do not travel to Syria. But what is important is Assad, the ruler who's gone away, was favorable to us on Kashmir. And Turkey is not favorable to us. It's more favorable towards Pakistan. So there's a fear that will the terrorism increase? Will ISIS come back again? Will Al-Qaeda come back again? The mercenaries who have become free now from fighting in Syria, will they get exported to outside Syria? But a similar kind of a prediction was also talked about when Afghanistan was taken over by Taliban. But there was not too much of a spillover of the Talibanis into the Indian subcontinent, and people who some of them who came, they were neutralized quite well by the Indian army. Now, as far as India is concerned, we have an advantage if you carry out a strategic, become a strategic mediator. It can definitely increase our influence in this area. But two important roles that we can perform here is the UN peacekeeping role, for which we already have a UN peacekeeping mission in that area, and also help this country, this part, especially Syria, in reconstruction. We have a tremendous capability, and let us hope that we are able to reduce the suffering of the common Syrian people. So as far as rebuilding Syria is concerned, it's a very Herculean task with lots of challenges. The institutions are not there. We have to create armed forces, police, judiciary, revitalize the shattered economy, fill up the political vacuum, establish a government which is inclusive. So all this is a very complex thing. Let us hope that the present government is able to do something. And the humanitarian crisis is tremendous. There are lots of statistical data available, but just for information, 6.5 lakh people have died over the last few years. 13 million people have been displaced. That is more than 50% of the population. And the other figures are available that 50% of the Syrians are become refugees all over the place. So today, the government which will come will have a huge challenge, and the governor has been appointed. The government has been appointed, and he says he will in next few months he hopes to include as many people as possible and try and build up a peaceful environment, try and build up a government which is all inclusive, and he will try and go in for reconstruction. What I do is, I mean, these are all the things which have come out in media quite a lot. But in next just about 3 to 4 minutes, I'll focus on one issue, that the Syrian crisis holds a lot of lessons as far as India is concerned. One would remember that Ukraine-Russia war has also, there have been a lot of lessons which we have learned from there. The battle between anti-tank weapons and the tanks, who's won, the Air Force, the Ukraine was able to defeat the Russian Air Force without having an Air Force. The increase in firing of missiles and drones, etc. So similarly, as far as Syrian crisis is concerned, there's a lot we can learn. It's a multifaceted case study which we can learn and draw lessons which are we can study from the Indian point of view. But it does tell you the complexities of the modern conflict, which is a combination of terrorist activity, modern warfare, plus media warfare, and all kinds of multi-domain warfare, in which many actors from all over the world participate in some way or the other, which is a combination of national security, foreign policy, humanitarian issues. So these are lessons which we need to learn from this crisis, which we need to analyze in a greater details. But I'll just get out about 2 or 3 more important issues which I thought were very relevant. First, what I call it is the intelligence failure. The USA, Russia, Iran, Israel, everybody and anybody who have very powerful intelligence agencies just could not predict that a regime change would take place in Syria in a matter of time. Just 7 days flat, and the regime was changed. So it's a big intelligence failure. as far as everybody is concerned. I think one of the main reasons is because these days people rely a lot on technological intelligence, and the human intelligence part is not up to the mark. I think the most important thing to understand here is we have to get into the minds of important leaders as to what are the things. Let's say in the Indian context, the various terrorist groups which are there, what are the leaders thinking about? What is the Pakistani ISI thinking about? What is the Pakistan military thinking about? What will Mr. G do next? We have a national security advisor who's going to go to China as per the news today, next week, and he's going to discuss a lot of things. So getting into the minds of important leadership of the political parties, as far as the terrorist groups, as far as the militias, etc., is something which is what needs to be done if you have to remain updated as far as intelligence is concerned. And that's not going to be easy. Mind weapons are coming out, but how do you get inside the mind of people who matter or the opinion makers? Second most important issue is big weapons, arms, ammunition, etc. do not increase military capability. I mean, something even the Afghan army had it, but they just collapsed. There's a very important aspect of war or warlike situation or terrorism, which is called as the human element of war. The minds of soldiers, leadership, etc. Why should the soldiers fight? How do you judge the morale of the armies which are fighting? Now you are told that possibly the morale of the Syrian army was not up to the mark because they didn't have pay, they were not looked after, and there was the leadership was poor, etc. But well, was it not known to the leadership of Syria, or maybe they were not bothered about? How do you inculcate fighting spirit among your soldiers? So there are lots of lessons which we can learn, and what is important is having. I mean, it has been said a number of times before also. There's a weapons and there's a man behind the weapon. And I think most important is the man behind the weapon. If the man behind the weapon decides to fight, then only will an army fight or will a nation fight. So therefore, focusing on the human element of war is something which we need to focus upon because technology by itself, social media by itself is not going to make you win the wars. So maybe we are in the early days of the Syrian war, as and when more and more facts come out, things will become more clearer, and maybe we can draw more useful lessons from the Syrian crisis. But one thing is very, very clear, each of the crises that is going in and around the world, we have to ensure that this crisis is studied, lessons drawn from the Indian perspective, and most important is converting this crisis into an opportunity as far as India is concerned. Like, for example, Ukraine war was converted into an opportunity by buying crude from Russia, refining it in India, and selling it to Europe, which is fighting with Russia. And we are also some kind of an ammunition supply is taking place. So therefore, crisis will take place. We are living in uncertain times, but we have to have the flexibility at the highest level to ensure that we are able to convert this crisis into an opportunity. Let us hope for the sake of Syrian people that the present government is able to control the violence and bring some kind of a peace to the country, because the biggest sufferers in this whole game are the children, the women, the elderly people. And Syria as a country has suffered hell of a lot. In fact, today's Times of India, there was a news that thousands of people were waiting outside the Syrian jails, where almost lakhs of political prisoners are there, hoping to find their near and dear ones. So for the sake of people of Syria, let us hope that the present government is able to bring some kind of a peace to this country so that they can lead a more peaceful environment. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. I have finished.
Thank you, Hemant sir. Thank you. If you can just stop presenting your presentation.
Yeah, just one second.
Invite Group Captain Purohit to continue with his part. Okay. In the meanwhile, it was so scheduled that Group Captain Purohit takes the first part because implications on India would have come last. But now, because of the technical problem, we would take on India once again if required in a question answer session. If somebody can ask, we will take it on that time. Thank you. Yeah, Group Captain Purohit.
Thank you, sir. And Apologies for the hitch in the beginning. That was due to a power failure. So I'll jump straight on to what I have been asked to speak about. And but to recap, this is and orientate the audience. North is as shown. This is a map of the Middle East. We are talking about Syria, which is over here, where my cursor is shown. I'm going to talk about Turkey, Lebanon, and Israel, and of course, United States, which is not in the Middle East, but it is a resident power in the Middle East. A closer look at Syria, and now one can see Lebanon and Israel a little more clearly. Now, this is the situation that existed in Syria at the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. And as you can see, that this brownish shaded portion is the area which the Syrian government led by Bashar al-Assad was controlling. And the rebels were controlling certain area to the north, northeast, and a bit of it over here. And this is the situation that existed as on 12 December 2024, by which time Assad had already fled to Russia. And one can see that the rebels had increased their area of dominance. This is just to give a perspective as to what how the things on ground changed. So with Assad gone, what is the likely fallout on the significant players to the north and west of Syria? So I'll start with Turkey. Turkey has played an important role in the affairs of the Middle East. With respect to Syria, Ankara and Damascus broke off ties in 2011 when the civil war in Syria started. The Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, backed the rebels and denounced Assad as a, I quote, murderer, unquote. Turkey supported Assad's opponents both politically and militarily. However, since late 2022, Mr. Erdogan had been seeking a rapprochement. In July this year, he even said that he was ready to host Assad at any time. But Assad refused the offer, saying he would meet only if Turkish forces withdrew from Syria. It has now been revealed that the offensive by the rebels was initially planned in mid-October. It was Turkey who vetoed it in the hope of a rapprochement with Syria. It was only after Ankara's efforts to normalize ties with the Assad regime were rebuffed that Turkey gave its green light to the rebels. Although Turkey was not directly involved, its support for rebel groups such as the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS, which has been talked about, was critical to the recent offensive. But Turkey has a very complex and difficult relationship with the HTS. It has pushed back against the expansion of HTS into the security zone in northwest Syria it carved out for itself, and has pressurized the HTS to drop all its Al-Qaeda affiliation. Now, this is the security zone which Turkey has established in Syria. It is about 30 kilometers deep inside into Syrian territory and runs for about 480 kilometers from east to west. So this is the shaded portion that is the security zone. At the onset of the offensive against Assad, pro-Turkey rebels seized Tal Rifat. This is Tal Rifat, a town which is north of Aleppo. This is Aleppo over here, and the surrounding villages where some 2 lakh Kurds were living. Additionally, Turkey also exerted pressure on HTS to avoid attacking Christian and Druze minorities. The extent of Turkey's influence over HTS is unknown, and it remains to be seen if the two can tango. Turkey has also used the present situation to make gains against the YPG terror group to secure itself. But Turkey has only limited control over the rebels. It has 2 major concerns. Firstly, in case the internal chaos in Syria continues or a power struggle emerges, the prospect of new refugees flowing into Turkey is real. Erdogan's government is currently facing a political backlash at home for hosting nearly 3.5 million Syrian refugees, which are the highest by any country in the world, and the prospects of new inflows, therefore, is quite worrisome. The second concern is whether the new dispensation in Syria cuts a deal with Syrian Kurds to enable them to form a statelet with autonomy. To prevent this, Turkey feels the elimination of the SDF and the YPG is of topmost priority. Diplomatically, Turkey has acted fast. It has reopened its embassy in Damascus after 12 years. It is making efforts to facilitate Syrian refugees to return home. It will also want to ensure that a new government in Syria will be friendly to Turkey and not to Iran. The defense minister of Turkey has said that his country is willing to give military support to the new Syrian government if asked. Now, as things stand, Turkey's consistent support to anti-Assad forces and hosting Syrian refugees has created a perception of Turkey being pro-people amongst the Syrians. Turkey is sure to capitalize on the immense goodwill it enjoys in Syria right now. It may also sense an economic opportunity in the reconstruction of Syria. As it is Syria's largest trading partner in the region, with bilateral trade in 2022 amounting to US dollars 3.5 billion. All these factors give Turkey an unrivaled leverage in the stabilization and rebuilding process. It is in a good position to emerge as the most influential foreign actor in Syria that can shape its future. However, it will have to overcome the numerous internal contradictions in Syria, arrive at a modus vivendi on the issue of Kurds with the Americans, and ensure that the proclivity of the Russia-Iran combined to create trouble is nipped in the bud. From north of Syria, I now move to the west of Syria, and I'll talk about Israel. While the support of Turkey was crucial in the ouster of Assad, the role of Israel in creating conditions for it has also been important. Along with Iran, Hezbollah was Assad's key backer. The Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was personally committed to saving Assad. However, Nasrullah's elimination and the weakening of Hezbollah by Israel emboldened the anti-Assad forces. Israel, which was at the receiving end of the Shia crescent, may now breathe a bit easy. The Shia crescent was mentioned. This is the Shia crescent, which basically comprises of countries with a Shia majority, extends from Iran through Syria on to Lebanon. And this particular slide shows the percentage of Muslim population that is Shia. This is just for interest. Now, the Shia crescent has basically, Assad's ouster has weakened Iran's ability to rebuild Hezbollah, as the Assad's regime was the conduit through which Iran provided material support to the Hezbollah. The fallout of these developments has therefore lessened Israel's security challenge. To preempt any fallout from Assad's departure, the Israeli military moved into the UN buffer zone in the Golan Heights following his departure. Now, this is the buffer zone where the Israelis have moved in and are in occupation. It also carried out airstrikes against Syrian military infrastructure. These strikes were criticized by Ahmad al-Shara, the HDS leader. Israel's government has approved a plan to encourage the expansion of settlements in the Golan Heights. This may not go well with the Syrians and has already elicited protests from Arab nations. The Israeli foreign minister's revelation that Israel has been talking with Kurdish rebels who control northeast Syria will make Turkey wary and add to the existing Turkey-Israel tension. So what makes sense for Israel? It makes sense for Israel to now diplomatically negotiate with the new government in Syria. Israel must use diplomatic means to ensure that the new power structure in Syria discontinues arms supplies to Hezbollah and is not aligned with Iran as in the past. This will ensure Israel's long-term peace and security. While the decades-long Arab-Israel animosity will not vanish anytime soon, a display of good statesmanship by Israel's leaders can at least revive the stalled peace efforts in the region. The next country I come to is Lebanon. Lebanon's various communities, especially Sunni, Christian, and Druze, reacted jubilantly to the fall of Assad's Ba'athist regime. However, there was trepidation among many Shias whose political leadership relied on Ba'athist cover and support. Syria had played a major role in Lebanon, intervening in the country's civil war, occupying the country in the post-war period, and manipulating Lebanon's political landscape to benefit its political and economic interests. Though it was removed from the country in 2005 following a mass uprising, the Syrian regime continued to maintain influence in the country through its allies and supporters. With Assad no longer on the scene, Lebanon can genuinely hope for an absence of the Ba'athist regime's stifling shadow over Lebanese politics. Forthcoming election on January 9th, 2025 would mark the first time in decades that Lebanon will elect a president who need not be approved by Damascus. An opportunity has arisen for Lebanese security institutions to function without direct or indirect interference from Syria. Lebanon also has a chance to ensure that the 1.5 million Syrian refugees it hosts have a chance to go back and reduce the economic burden on Lebanon. The inimical role of Syria, Hezbollah, and Iran in Lebanese affairs had prevented the political system from functioning in an inclusive and effective manner. With the diminishing of these entities, the people of Lebanon have a chance to rebuild their institutions and start a new chapter. There is cautious optimism that Assad's absence can lead to an environment in which the political deadlock and paralysis that have plagued Lebanon will subside. There is also a push from the civil society to fully activate provisions of the constitution that were previously abjured, disarm Hezbollah, and fully implement the Taif Accord. However, an antagonistic Hezbollah that rearms itself and an intransigent Israel that uses disproportionate force in Lebanon could be spoilers in Lebanon's quest for peace and development. Last but not the least, the United States of America. Similar to Turkey, Israel, and Lebanon, Assad's exit from Syria is a net gain for the US, but it is far from being in a sweet spot. The biggest security concern for the US is the return of Islamic State or Daesh. Just after Assad's downfall, the US struck about 75 IS targets in an effort to prevent the group from gaining a foothold. Mired in a complex web of Middle East geopolitics, the US has allies in the region who often compete and confront each other. Managing them, each of whom have conflicting security and status interests, is not going to become easy just because an inimical regime is no longer on the scene. Turkey has been unhappy with the US support of the Syrian Democratic Forces, or the SDF. The US has proactively helped broker an agreement between the Turks and the SDF after Assad's departure, although it's unclear how long that can last. The US approach has been positive in the aftermath of Assad. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has engaged with Jordan, Turkey, Iraq, and the Arab League to forge a consensus to shape the future of a post-Assad Syria. Blinken's remark that he had secured the backing of the 12 foreign ministers from the Arab League, Turkey, and top officials from the European Union and United Nations is a welcome signal. Another pragmatic move by the US has been to establish direct contact with HTS and other groups in Syria. Blinken further stated that the US would recognize and support a new government in Syria that respected the rights of minorities and women, prevented terror groups from taking hold, ensured humanitarian aid reached the people in need, and secured and destroyed any remaining Assad-era chemical weapons. This raises the question of whether the US will eventually remove HTS from the list of a designated terrorist organization. The US has given a broad hint. It is now up to the HTS to seize the opportunity. As a goodwill gesture, the US could start suspending economic sanctions against Syria. Though the challenge is enormous, the US moves augur well for the region. But there are potential spoilers. President-elect Donald Trump has indicated that the US has nothing to do with Syria. The recent events have been a setback for Russia, and it will thirst for revenge. Israel's military actions, if continued unabated, will create more fissures amongst US allies, making the task of achieving consensus in Syria very difficult. One only hopes that prudence prevails. In conclusion, I will put forth 3 points that we need to keep in mind. First, the Syrians have suffered for too long and deserve a decent, dignified future. For the first time in decades, there is genuine hope and optimism. However, optimism is no substitute for planning towards a better future. Second, HTS has stated its intent to respect minorities and give up the path of violence. However, no terrorist group in the Middle East has moderated its ideology upon assuming power. Third, a power vacuum, fragmentation, intensification of proxy wars in Syria, and geopolitical realignments are still possibilities. The best antidote to these remain an internally united Syria, a unified strategy by the major players to aid Syrian reconstruction and keep the interests of the Syrian citizens uppermost. I admit it is easier said than done. The challenge is enormous, but the solution is quite simple, as expressed by Albert Einstein, whom I quote: "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." Unquote. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Group Captain Purohit. Thank you very much. And I think your last few statements were very profound. Before I open the house for question answers, I would like to add few of my thoughts that maybe hope is the best positive sentiment for Syria. Syria is a boiling pot, like a cauldron of varied interests. And the slide that I showed you of the crisscross is primarily because one man's friend is other man's foe. And one doesn't know who's your friend and who's the foe. And add to this the ISIL or the ISIS, they have spoiled the entire equation in Syria. Just as Group Captain Purohit said that this power struggle was taking place, Assad had fled, US had bombed ISIS bases in the center of Syria, which they thought could reactivate themselves due to the power vacuum that has been created. So in light of all this, there are so many questions. There are more questions than answers. HTS was a part of ISIS before it separated. The Nusrat group actually didn't join them in the later part. But earlier they were part of the ISIS philosophy. They are the ones who are now in power. They are the ones who liberated Syria. How far will they stick to the promises Jilani has made to the West? Only God would know. History bears testament to the fact that nobody who's captured power has retained moderate stance. They've always tended to be more radical as power has been strengthened by them. So in saying all this, I will now open the house to questions, but I have the chat box is full. And luckily, everyone wants to ask a question for which there may not be very many answers, but the panel here would try and answer that. There are some statements, I'll read it and let it go. One first was from ADG Chafikar, I think in the
Nitin, can I just intervene only for 1 second? There are quite a few questions are there. So what you can do is possibly first 1/3 question you can answer, next 1/3 I can answer, next 1/3 Group Captain Purohit can answer, because there's no, you answer the first 1/3 and then hand over to me whenever you wish to. I'll hand over to Group Captain Purohit, because there are far too many questions.
So what you are saying is you could be ending up answering Turkey or Israel. So I don't want to do that. I want you to answer Russia. I want to in Iran, Iraq. So accordingly, I will tailor make. I will take some questions also, but I'll try and simplify to say that if there are statements, let's not answer them. Just read it and leave it. So the first was from ADG Chafikar: in the timeline leading to fall of Assad regime, did we miss out Arab Spring genuine indigenous resistance against the autocratic regime? Jihadis taking advantage of the situation, Russian aided air strike ostensibly against terrorists, but actually targeting popular. So in some way, all this has come about. Maybe if there is time, we will take on that. it's Atreya who's asking. Professor Steve Wilkinson, in his book, he states that when a group dominates the armed forces, there is a tendency for military dictatorship. So has India been on a concerted effort since independence to keep army mixed with Syria? Mixed. That is a question of Indian army related to Syria, maybe not the right time. We cannot compare Syria and India, so we'll leave it for the time being. Maybe take it up if we have time more. Has the crisis resulted in refugees fleeing like the last time? This is Shrikant Kulkarni. That's a general question, and yes, all over. And most of them have gone into Turkey, as Group Captain Purohit has brought out. A lot of them has come to Lebanon and gone to Jordan and even Iraq. Again, Atreya, Assad was a secular. Earlier, Saddam Hussein was also secular. Why does West tend to depose secular regimes in favor of fundamental forces? Okay, this is a question that can be taken up. Brigadier Mahajan, you want to take that up?
See, the point is, Assad being secular, Saddam Hussein being not secular, their secular versus radicalized views keep on changing depending upon which side they want to go into. There's nobody who's clearly secular, nobody who's clearly radical, nobody is purely supporting a terrorist group, etc. I think their motto seems to be to remain in power at all cost, So you cannot divide these people into secular versus fundamentalist. But what I can, it's not easy to, let's say, clearly say one person is secular, second person is fundamentalist, third person is in between the two, The division is not very, very easy. But all that I can say is that the Western world led by USA has been carrying out lots of regime change. And in this regime change, they have disturbed governments which were doing well. Bangladesh is an example where a government was in power, popularly elected, and the regime change in Bangladesh is attributed to USA deep state, etc. Actually, what the USA or the Western world, or for that matter Russia, do is they try and protect their own national interest. So whichever country is on their side, they try and protect him, So this clear distinction is not there that USA will support only the democratic countries and Russia will support only the communist countries and Turkey will support only this, Wherever an opportunity rises to increase your sphere of influence, they change sides, change track, etc. So but regime change is taking place at a much faster speed than what it was earlier. And there are multiple reasons for that. So really there is no answer. Just that people who can change a regime which is suitable to them try and do it. China tries to change regimes, so does Russia, so does USA. No clear-cut answers. They all try and protect their own.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, Group Captain Purohit, do you have any thoughts on this? Being Iraq as part of your... So his question is basically why the West is trying to favor fundamentalist forces vis-a-vis secular dictators, if that be the correct one. I don't know whether there is a secular dictator, correct term.
Frankly, I have serious doubts about whether both Saddam and Assad were really secular. Number two, West bashing is fashionable. There's no doubt about it. But the point is that how do you justify the actions, whether secular or unsecular, whatever his outlook is, of people who kind of inflict the kind of atrocities that these two have inflicted. They have not only inflicted atrocities on the people, they destabilized the region with the kind of action. So I guess that evil had to go, and these two evils have gone, and I think we'll let it rest at that.
Okay, I'll add a little bit of my thought that secularism as an individual and secularism as a regime has two different connotations. Bashar al-Assad may be secular as a person when he started, but by the time he ended up being a dictator, he realized it doesn't work. And by no means he was really secular, because a later point in time, even the Alawites suffered under him. And it became people who were pro and people against. So that was the only two distinctions, nothing to do with religion. Anyone who supported him, even if it was, let's say, Sunni, he would probably support that particular clan. So we move ahead. Can Indian government jockey into position to buy Syrian or crude oil? Now, this has already been answered by Group Captain Purohit, because the area which produces crude in Syria is already under the possession of SDF, which is the Kurdish part of the Kurdish rebels of in the Syrian territory, and they were not allowing Syria to use either the profits from it or the oil to be part of the economy. So now Indian government cannot jockey that. Maybe with Turkey later, or if SDF and Turkey come to any kind of an agreement, or later a government which comes into Syria more friendly disposed to that SDF, then we can say probably see to that problem. The next was by Pankaj Malhotra, the same one by Pankaj Malhotra, that is Group Captain Pankaj Malhotra. We may not win a war alone by technological edge and media blitz, but we can surely lose one. That is sure. That's a statement. So how can we determine how Pakistan reacts to Syrian crisis? Once again by Group Captain Pankaj Malhotra. I think I'll give a chance to both Brigadier Hemant Mahajan and Group Captain Purohit. What do you think? How will Pakistan react to this?
It doesn't matter. Pakistan has got serious problems, It doesn't matter how they behave. But one thing is very clear. The Assad regime they had supported India on Kashmir, while as far as Turkey is concerned, they definitely have been supporting the Pakistan view. So Pakistan's opinion doesn't matter, but if Turkey decides to say something anti-India, that will definitely matter. That we can do nothing about it except try and tell Turkey the economic relations with India are very, very important. So you better behave. And Pakistan is a bottomless well in which nothing can come out of it except more terrorists. So between the two, you should go in for a friendship with India, by which you would prosper economically. As far as Pakistan is concerned, you'll only keep on giving them aid. So maybe diplomacy will have to be utilized to ensure that Turkey doesn't turn anti-India. Nitin.
Okay, yeah. Group Captain Purohit, any thoughts on Pakistan?
Pakistan, I agree, is not in a position to really do anything or influence anything over there, at least not right now. And I think they are mired in their own controversies. So as far as Turkey is concerned, I'd just like to add one point that was made. Turkey had made certain noises about Kashmir in the past. However, in the September 2024 UN General Assembly, Erdogan and the Turkish representative did not mention Kashmir in the United Nations at all. So this has been a significant change or a deviation from what they have done, and I think it's a positive sign that we need to work upon. Because all said and done, in the region, that is the region around Syria we are talking about, Turkey is the most important and influential player. Apart from, of course, US, who has got its own interests. So I think if we have to secure our interests for the future, we need to work together with the countries that matter there, and not hold old baggage, and rather carry old baggage about some statements made here and there. That's all.
Thank you. We'll move to the next question by Atreya. Alawites are distinct group and claim not to be Shia Muslims, Kurds, Druze, etc. Also distinct non-Islamic groups. Given that Syria is predominantly Sunni, are Sunni, Hanafi, Maliki, and other sect, how are they all accommodated? Now, I will answer this question and also club your question earlier. Now, the formation in 1970 of the government, when Assad took part, Syria was divided into two distinct clubs. One was the landowners and second was the military. The landowners, which were 70%, most of them were Sunnis. They were an authority by themselves. They ruled Syria. They ruled as dictatorially as anyone else would have. It was Hafiz al-Assad, along with his Druze friends who were in the military, who took part. And thereafter, it was them who took the banner of Syria ahead, and the landowners fell. The Sunnis, in fact, became the so-called minorities in spite of being the majority. Thereafter, for 50 years, this is what happened. The Syrian army composition was more toward the Alawites, the Druze, and the Kurds, and that is how the Sunnis were in fact relegated to the background. Now, whether Alawites are Shiites or not, that's a question that it's a sect. The sect is more aligned to the Shias. Now, whether they consider themselves Shias or not, I mean, there are many in what do you call in Middle East and in that region, the sects which are both leaning towards the Sunnis and leaning towards Shias. But there are commonalities, and that's why Alawites are more similar to Shiites than they are to Sunnis, so they identify more with them. Now, it was because the Alawites were traditionally into the armed forces that they took part. Once they took part, there was no going back. There was absolutely no going back, because power thereafter, generates more power, and they became more and more powerful. The Sunnis are now come back. The HTS's majority is Sunnis. They have now come back to power. Now, this will be an interesting play as to who is, in fact, exactly what happened in Iraq. And that is why the fear of Westerns and everybody is, it's not so easy. It's not a political problem. It's going to be, once again, a sectoral problem. Whether the Sunnis will gain power, whether the Shias will gain power. If you see any of the interviews taken by BBC or CNN, the first question they ask is, what is the status of pro-Assad supporters in Syria today? Most of them say they are quiet. They're quiet because maybe they're waiting for a chance. How much have they gathered? How much support they have gathered from other parts of the world or other groups? One doesn't know. So this is how in times to come in Syria, in days to come, it is the basic Shia-Sunni conflict will once again play up. If they are able to manage it, if they are able to live together, I think peace will prevail. I will go to the next question. How about the role of Saudi Arabia and UAE, two major economies in Middle East? In the last 1 year, many people from Russia, Ukraine, and other Middle countries have shifted to UAE. Brigadier Majan, do you have any idea about the UAE's role in this whole affair? Because Saudi and other Qatar we know, but what about the stance of UAE? Any idea?
What has come out in the media is that the UAE has expressed concern that terrorism may, again raise its head there, especially ISIS is what they're worried about. So they're basically trying to say that this region should not turn into some kind of a breeding ground as far as terrorism is concerned, and they want peace to come in this area, which is what everybody wants, including Saudi Arabia. So nothing specific except that they don't want terrorism to raise their head.
Okay, Gupran Purohit, in this whole discussion, Saudi has not come up anywhere. Now we know the stance of Saudi, but is there a particular reason why Saudis have been quiet?
Primarily because they are following a wait and watch policy. Number one, Saudi Arabia doesn't have that much influence, or they were not really too much involved into the Syrian affairs. That is number one. So that's why both, in fact, UAE and Saudi, and two things that these the Saudis and the UAE are worried about. One is the return of the Islamic State or any Islamist kind of government which is more orthodox and Sharia oriented. That they are not really in favor of. Number two, they also want to see as to how the future plays out between Turkey, the Kurds, and the US, because that is a bone of contention. The Kurds are a bone of contention between US and Turkey. So they are basically playing a wait and watch. In case they don't want Turkey to be, they want a certain balance of power to be maintained. So they don't want Turkey to get unduly large influence and role in Syrian affairs. So that is why right now it's wait and watch. But they have, in Blinken's meeting, though with the Arab Council, there are feelers. I mean, in some of the reports, it says that there are feelers that the Saudis and the UAE would back any kind of peace efforts that the US would do, as long as certain balance of power is maintained.
Thank you. This question was asked by Sanjay Mane. We go to the next question by NY Chaudhary. Now refugees have started returning to Syria. How should India act so that Bangladeshis and other refugees can return to their homeland? So it's out of context, so I will leave it here. Refugees may have started, but yet there is a lot to go, because so many refugees all over coming back to Syria. I do not know whether they would be interested in starting back to their homeland until they know what the future is going to be. The last question we have here is Indus International Research Foundation. I'm sure Sri Atre has written this. Can Kurds, who control vast tracts of Syrian land and its oil, constitute a large rebel group, hope to stake claim in a separate Kurdistan? Israel supports such an entity, and will it be against Turkey, Iran, as well as Iraqi that suits Israeli interests? Your thoughts. So, in a way, Group Captain Purohit has already answered this question, but maybe I'll throw it once again. Kurds, why specifically? Because the Kurds have a lot of interest in this whole game now. They are in a place which is at the junction of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Kurd have a substantial resource in their hands, and they are a substantial, real estate territory. And the most important point, it was the SDF which actually threw out ISIS from Syria. They were the principal agency to throw out ISIS from Syria. With all these things, they would play surely a very major role. And your thoughts first, Group Captain Purohit.
That is absolutely right. The Kurds are now going to take their pound of flesh, which is what I mentioned was that if there is some kind of a statelet, I mean, it's a little autonomous region, the Turks are obviously going to be dead against it. And how do then two NATO partners, that is the US and Turkey, reconcile to it, is something which one has to only wait and watch and see how it unfolds. But I guess with oil being controlled right now by the Kurds, or the areas that they are presently dominating, I think, it's a guess, but I feel that there would be some give and take, especially with Trump coming to office next month. There would be some give and take with some kind of economic stakes, making perhaps Turkey also a stakeholder in the oil business there. I think that would be one possible way forward. But it calls for a lot of flexibility of approach, flexibility in negotiations, and maturity, which has generally been absent in the region.
Yeah. Your last thoughts, Brigadier Hemant?
I can only say this: the region is completely in a state of flux, and the whole world seems to be tired of fighting wars. At this point of time, USA wanting to support us independent Kurds, I have my doubts. Though some kind of an autonomy and all can be given. Similarly, Turkey doesn't have the capacity to let a new nation be born. I have my doubts. Turkey is not as strong as they make it out to be. So, and these days, no boundaries are going to be redrawn. No new states are going to be created. Everybody, what they want is they want a peaceful region with various groups getting their own pound of flesh in terms of more autonomy. The world is tired of war, including USA. Russia doesn't have capability to fight a war. Israel missiles are finished. USA doesn't have adequate missiles. That is why the logistic pause or war pause has come all over, simply because there are not missiles left to fire. So therefore, new wars, new nations looks difficult at this point of time. Maybe when they have more time, maybe they can go in for an independent Kurdistan.
Thank you, Brigadier Majan. Thank you very much. This question was asked by Group Captain Mehta of Indus Research Foundation, not by Sri Atre, so my apologies there. That brings us to the end of questions here. If there are any questions, I can wait for 30 seconds more. You can raise your hand. If not, I'll give my concluding remarks and hand over to General Majan. I think doesn't appear to be anyone who is interested in asking any more questions. So in my concluding remarks, I can say that I would say that this particular webinar has been significantly important from one perspective. Till now, whatever webinars I have attended or I have been participating in, more or less things were quite clear as to what is likely to happen, how players will react. In Syria's case, in the Syrian crisis, nobody knows how the future will unfold. None of the stakeholders, none of the people inside, none of the people outside, they're all guessing. We are all guessing. Let's face fact, we're all guessing. Even HTS today would not probably be very sure as to how their future will hold, whether they will stake for power, whether they can hold elections in Syria, holding elections in Syria, it looks so difficult to me. I don't think there is a chance. If history be any judge, they had 5 coups in 10 years. I mean, how does this work out? They started with a democratically elected government, and look where they've landed. 50 years of dictatorship. So in a state in a country which has got 18 sects, which has got more than 12 religions, which has got uh, a population 80 to 90% living under poverty, of various sectarian allegiances, it's so difficult to bring them together. It will be a very Herculean task. Let's hope in some manner peace will return. Surely there will be a lot of struggle for that peace to come. It is like saying to keep Gandhi poor, you have to spend a lot of money. So it is to get peace in Syria, there will have to be a lot of bloodshed. No, I'm not making that statement. I'm just hoping that this statement doesn't occur and peace will return to Syria, because the Middle East, like Brigadier Majan says, requires peace. People are tired of fighting. Everyone is tired of fighting. Hopefully a new world order will come, which brings more with, you never know. President Trump might just surprise everybody, because surely, in my opinion, he will stop the Ukraine war. So if he does what he does in Ukraine, maybe he might succeed a little bit in Syria also. With that remarks, I conclude today's webinar. Thank both the speakers who presented their views exceedingly well, beyond my particular imagination. I myself learned a lot from their thoughts and viewpoints. Thank you very much for all the audience who were patiently listening, and all the question-answer sessions, questions which were so well put and so detailed. Thank you very much. So, Majan sir, over to you for your vote of thanks.
Thank you, Nitin, for your concluding remarks and for your presentation. When STS captured Damascus, I think they were as surprised as some of the political parties in India when they won the recent elections. I think it is something that is what has happened. I was in Iran from 89 to 90 as a military observer with the United Nations Military Observer Group. And that time we knew a lot about the countries around Iraq, around Iran and Iraq. But even being there, one had heard very little about Syria, whether good or bad. So that is how this country is unknown to people in this region, particularly in India. A few days ago, when we had thought of this webinar, some people were asking questions, or people were saying, this is just a new thing which has happened, so let us wait and watch. So I did not say anything, but my own feeling was that you can continue waiting and watching, and even after 3 years, you will not know what is happening, as it is happening in the case of the Ukraine war, or the war of Israel and with Gaza. So therefore, it's been a very good webinar, and we've learned much about this region, that is Syria. And I must thank General Gadkari for having given us a good background about this region, about the milestones in history, how the Golan Heights were captured by Israel in 1973, and they're being strengthened now to their advantage. Brigadier Hemant Mahajan told us about how bad the economy is and how they plan to bring back Sharia, and why Syrian army did not fight like it happened in the case of the Afghanistan army, and how Turkey is trying to play a very, very independent role, and what the Indians can do in this kind of a situation, and some lessons for India. And a very insightful analysis by Group Captain Purohit and on the role of Turkey and the security zone that they have created in this region, and what are the concerns for Turkey. And he told us and showed us the Shia Crescent, which is playing a very important role in this region. The questions and answers raised by all the participants were really very good and made the discussion very lively. And we had a very good representation. We had almost 42 persons participating in this webinar, which is a very, very good sign. And now that the crisis is still, unfolding. So thank you all very much for joining this webinar. Thank you, and Jai Hind. And you can log out now. And I'll stop the recording.
Thank you. Jai Hind. Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Purohit.
Sir.
Thank you, Purohit.